Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda, and today I have for you my November wrap up. For the month of November, I read one, two, three, four, five, six books and two partial books. I got a lot of audiobook time in, not as much or reading, like physical reading time in, which is pretty typical for me. I've been just crushing it with audiobooks this year. But the first book I listened to on audiobook was The Women in the Castle. This was a 12-hour and 43-minute audiobook that I rated 3 stars. Um, this book takes place at I want to say beginning of World War II, where we kind of follow a couple of more high-class women whose husbands decide that they want to do something about the injustice of what Hitler's doing to the Jewish population and other populations that he doesn't agree with, that don't fit into his perfect mold. So it's kind of about the women surviving through the war and how they take care of each other and raise their kids together, and just kind of form relationships during the war with people who they decide to trust, who they don't. One of the women, I don't remember their names at this point because I listened to it so long ago. In audiobooks, I have a hard time remembering names unless I see them written down. But the main woman that we follow, her husband basically puts her in charge of finding the wives of these other men who are rebelling against the German government, and making sure that, she takes them and it keeps them safe during the war. So it's kind of about how mostly two women she kind of brings under her wing and takes care of, and they just survive together. So I liked it. I thought some of the characters were not the greatest, but their dynamic together was all right. It definitely painted a picture. It wasn't one of the more hard-hitting World War II novels, but it was still a good representation of the time, I think. I don't think it romanticized the time period too much. I think it was just a good story to listen to. The next book I listened to was a book I finally caved in on because a lot of people were hyping it up when the Netflix movie was released, but that is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This was an 8-hour and 22-minute audiobook that I gave a 3-star rating. It was a nice break just to kind of add in a contemporary. I think it's been a little bit since I've read a contemporary, so this was a nice, fun one. I don't really know what more to say about contemporaries. I thought it was cute. I am waiting for my holds. I think my library has the second book only in physical book or ebook, and then the third book I think is an audiobook. So I'm just kind of waiting. I guess I'll continue on with the series, but I'm not in any sort of rush to finish it, and I would like to watch the Netflix movie because it does seem like it's pretty cute. So then the next book I listened to is a book that I have been wanting the physical format of for a very long time, but specifically the UK edition because I love the UK covers for these books. But I read the first and most of the second book during the Fall into Fantasy readathon, and I thought it would be a good idea to listen to the books first since I did have them on Audible. I think I also have the first one on my Kindle before I, peer pressured one of my colleagues in the UK to bring over a copy for me, or spent mass amounts of money on shipping and customs to get a copy in. So that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. It was an 18-hour and 20-minute audiobook that I gave a 4-star rating. I really liked the main characters that we follow. I thought their dynamic was really good. A part that bothered me was just kind of the insta love, and I thought it was going to be more of an adventure. and not as easy to find Weep as it kind of turned out. But I guess then just learning more about the city and what goes on in it and the magic in it. Hi, Ronan. Filled in what I wanted for the adventure part. So that was a lot of fun. And then I also listened to Muse of Nightmares, which I didn't finish during the readathon, but I did finish shortly after. And that one was a little shorter at 15 hours and 54 minutes. And I gave it a 3-star rating. I didn't like it quite as much. I didn't feel like the story was progressing as much as I wanted it to. And it was very, like the first book too, this is another thing I didn't really care about it, is that the relationships in it were just so juvenile. And one thing I had mentioned in my vlog was that I really liked that our main character Laszlo was in his early 20s and not a teenager, so I kind of thought it would be a bit more adult than it was, but it wasn't. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but overall I did like both of the books quite a bit, and I am excited to dive into more books written by Laini Taylor. I think she's got a very unique way with words, and she's just very lyrical and beautiful in her writing, so I would like to visit more of her stories. And then the last book I listened to on audiobook, which I paused in between when I started it and the Fall into Fantasy readathon, and then I picked it back up after. I actually started this book, which probably wasn't a good idea, on my flight from, I think, Dallas to Austin. And that is The Mountain Between Us by, I think, Charles Martin, I want to say, is the author. And that was a 9-hour and 55-minute audiobook that I gave a 4-star rating. So I knew this book was a movie. And for whatever reason, when I read the synopsis, I thought it was about this man and this woman that kind of come together at the airport, and they get snowed into an airport. They didn't get snowed into an airport. They get snowed into a mountain instead. So it's a book about friendship, love, survival, all those things. There's a dog in the story, and his name is Tink, but along the way they forgot his name, so they named him Napoleon. And I imagine him being like, I don't remember, I know he was a small dog because he could fit under the charter plane's pilot seat, but I just imagine him being this small little scrappy dog whose, ego is bigger than they are, and they have the biggest hearts in the world, and he was just ready to take on anything. So that provided, I think, a lot of comic relief during the book, but it was also really sad when something's revealed at the end. I was telling my coworker about it, and we were both like starting to get teary about it when we were talking about it, and she's like, oh, maybe I'll have to check it out now. So I thought it was good. I would really like to see the movie. I love Kate Winslet. I think she's gorgeous. I think she's a not perfect. I think she's a really great actress. So I would love to watch that, and I'll probably end up watching it soon. I'll have to see if it's on Netflix. And then, so for total hours read, it was 65 hours and 14 minutes that I read. And then physical books. The first book I finished was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This was a book I had planned to read in October that I never got around to, so I read it at the beginning of November, I believe. This was only a 103-page book, and I gave it a 3-star rating. This, for me, was one of those classics that I feel like the adaptations that have come out since brought more life to the story than the classic actually did. But I am glad to have more of a base knowledge of how the story was intended, and I do really appreciate what people have done since to kind of make it their own sort of story. So that was really good. I also started reading on my flight from, I think, SeaTac to Dallas, Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I never know how to say his last name, but this is a sci-fi book. I started reading it on my Kindle, and I only got 25 pages in, and it's not really holding my attention. Like, I really haven't had a desire to go back and read it since. But I do want to give it a chance because a friend recommended it to me. So I want to at least make a bigger dent in before I call it quits on the book. And then the other book that I partially started was The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. I got 126 pages into this book. So I don't have a rating for it yet, but I do have a readathon coming up in December, which will be perfect for finishing this during. And I think the story has a lot of potential, but I really, really dislike the main character, Alice. She's just not very likable, in my opinion. She's just, you know, this hardcore chickie that smokes and drinks and cusses. Oh, that's another thing. You can think I'm a square. It's perfectly fine. But they have said the F word so many times in this book, and it's a young adult book. So, I mean, people as young as like 14 are picking this up, and maybe they don't have a problem with it, and that's fine. But just the amount of swearing in a young adult book is, like, it just doesn't leave a very good taste in my mouth. So I don't really have, like, a super strong desire to finish it. And then mixed with not liking our main character, I like her friend that's helping her out, and he's probably like the reason that I'm gonna finish this book, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, I don't know yet what I'm gonna rate this book since I'm only probably a third of the way through, but we shall see. So in total for pages read, I read 234 pages. And for the 6 books, my average star rating was a 3.3 star, which is pretty average. I think it's, yeah, been around like between 3 and 3.3 for the majority of the year. So it'll be interesting to see how December shapes up to be. I have read my first book, and I did give it a high rating. So I'm excited to see what the rest of the year brings. I really hope you enjoyed this wrap up. If you feel so inclined, please let me know down in the comments what your favorite read for the month was, and I will chat with you there until my next video. Bye!